So this is ClearPoint Unlock. This is the first of a three-part series on embracing the acceleration of change, and we're going to talk about that at an organisation level. My name is Rob Cleghorn, I'm CTO at ClearPoint, and I have with me Bjarne.
Hey, my name is Bjarne Hansen. I'm a principal consultant here at ClearPoint, and it's great to be here. Really excited about the chat that we're going to have today, Rob.
Cool, Bjarne. So it's just good to have you down here for the chat, and I guess we're going to be talking about change, and we've seen a lot of change in 2023. Yep. A lot of emerging tech coming on. There's a lot of AI is a big discussion. There's quite a bit of uncertainty going into 2024. But one thing that is pretty clear is we've seen a huge amount of change in 2023. A lot of stuff happening globally, but obviously the AI disruption in technology, massive, and we see things accelerating, and because of this. So, we're going to talk a bit about going to 2024 and how do we embrace that change, and particularly at an organisation level.
Yeah. So at an organisation level, it's good to have a long-term strategic vision. And as part of that long-term strategic vision, it's always best to be outcomes-orientated, action-orientated. But as part of that, the key thing for an organisation to do is understand the change within the context of their organisation. Where are they on their journey of change? And what do they need to do to get there at certain points of time? So what's a good way of breaking that up, Rob, and how do organisations get started on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough one, isn't it? You think about that problem and you think about how big it is and try to think, well, what do we do? So traditionally what we've always looked at is people, process and technology and as a good way of sort of breaking things up. And we can sort of build on that. I think 2023 we sort of moved away from that a bit to what we like to use, culture, ways of working in technology, and because culture is much more of a humanistic, holistic approach to things you can do and things you can change and set up. And then ways of working over process, ways of working is a bit more about some of those really cool agile bits where you're really trying to continuously improve your ways of working and tweak and make things better. And so sort of, tipping the hat to those things and trying to look at that. And then when you break it up into those different categories, you can start thinking about who needs to be involved at what stages and how do we get starting. Yeah. I guess typically, it starts with vision and strategy, though, doesn't it? And how do you see that folding into making these changes?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's about creating that collective vision, collective understanding. And with that, then it's about the collective buy-in of the organisation. So it always starts from the top, but it is about, almost as part of the strategy, promoting that within the organisation. That's a really foundational element.
Yeah, they say strategy is 80% communication or repetition, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's really important to make sure everyone understands it's not having an amazing strategy that no one really understands or understand or sees or really is engaged with.
Yeah, because if you can start that, it then becomes everybody's strategy, and that's a really important way of looking at how to drive the buy-in. Another really important factor is actually giving people the capacity to actually, in the space, to actually understand where they fit in that strategy. Quite often we see in organisations where they have the strategic direction that they want to go down, but then they don't give people the space and time to actually work through and deliver on that vision. They have to continue doing their work, day-to-day work, but then they've been given more work on top of that to try and move the dial forward for the organisation. So the final point of that is actually to encourage the long-term thinking across the business. So obviously from the top, there's the strategic thinking, but then when you get down to the teams, how do you encourage and foster the long-term thinking and that alignment to strategy at the same time with the ability to sort of start small and foster, because there's a real balance in that space of going big, but that's not necessarily sustainable for a business. And then there's also the starting small, low risk, learning, and then also just not too much commitment too early on. Okay, Rob, so with that said, how do we, as part of the organisation, ensure that we're building the right thing at the right time?
Yeah, it's the $6 million question, isn't it? And everyone wants to know the answer to that question. Are we building the right thing? The exec want to know, the teams want to know, actually people on the ground, on the tools, what they want to know. is this actually going to be a good thing to build? But it's actually the wrong question to answer, because the only person who can answer that question is the customers, right? Are we selling the stuff that we're building? And so, I think a better question to ask, are we set up to enable us to be building the right thing, is a better question, right? And that's when we start thinking organisationally, what are the things that we can change to make sure we're set up, and we've got, most importantly, the right people making the right decision at the right time.
Yep.
And so, and effectively, there's a compromise there from centralised decision making to the other end of the spectrum, design by committee, where nothing gets done, or it's always compromised decisions and no risk taking. Yep. And so you've got to find that balance, and every organisation is different in that. But there's a few things that we can think of, and obviously that cultural piece, but also the ways of working. One of the things that's quite often you see is what we call the hippo syndrome, where the highest paid person in the room gets to make all the calls, and that's not really an anti-pattern of what we want to be doing, right? We want the best people who are subject matter experts and understand that the data to make those decisions, and so getting that data is really important, and that's sort of flows into the technology and change, and making sure that everything all the technology is out there, that we are getting the data that we need to be able to make really good decisions. All the analytics, we're understanding our customers, we're understanding how they're using it, we're understanding the market, we're understanding the fit and what our competitors are doing, so that we're really got everything we need to make really good decisions quickly and fast, and that's a real enabler.
Yeah, so I think just if we take that back from a vision statement to the outcome, what the business is driving for, and then sort of trusting the teams that are specialists in the area to make that decentralized decision making.
Yeah, so we're talking a lot here about empowerment and decentralizing, all that stuff. So, as a leader, how do you get out of the way? How do you let that happen?
Yeah, so I think it's actually creating that visibility. So off the back of marketing the strategy to the business and creating that buy-in, what it is then constant discussion and checkpoints at a sort of micro level around our teams. What are the teams working through? Are they on the right track? And then getting that feedback. Because when you think about it, trust is a two-way street. So the leadership needs to trust the people that are helping deliver the strategy. And likewise, the people that are doing the work and delivering, the engineering teams, need to actually provide that trust, provide that window.
That's a good one, isn't it? I think those people often, the team just blames the leaders, whereas actually they're accountable for providing that trust and showing progress towards the goal, right? Showing progress towards the outcomes, showing progress towards the vision. That it's like you say, I think that's a really good way of summing up. It's a two-way street, right? That trust, and you have to earn it, and to be able to go, we're an agile, you can't hold us to anything. Yep. Well, that's not going to work for anyone, because the real world's there, right? We've got budgets, we've got deadlines, we've got customers that need things. So we have to be able to adapt and make sure that transparency is there for everyone to be able to see.
Yeah, it's a bit of a fallacy, isn't it? I guess it comes down to what I said before around everybody owning the strategy and just getting that buy-in. As part of the work that the team does, and as part of that communication, there's always foundational elements, particularly if an organisation's embarking on a long-term journey and their place within that journey, they might not necessarily be set up correctly at the start. So there are some foundational elements that need to be in place.
Yeah, especially across the technology landscape, isn't there? You think about how many times have we seen technical debt holding back companies, and the ability to change, the ability to adapt and move fast. So, I often see that all that hardcore, horrible software engineering work is not really celebrated well. Everyone's after the shiny new toys.
Yep.
Whereas if you can make sure that you've got those foundations, right? It's similar to a house, isn't it? When you've got a house with crumbling foundations and you try and build another story on top, it never goes well. So you've really got to make sure you celebrate that foundations and having a really good base that you can then build and move fast on. And I think that's really important, often overlooked.
Yeah. And once again, the business needs to understand that, because they might not, or the leadership might not actually understand that. But once again, that communication, creating that visibility is key to sort of helping align on those pieces.
Yeah, it's always a negative thing, tech data. That's why we call it tech love.
Yeah,
it's
I like that
tech love. And there's a bit of a difference between a startup and a big organisation. Startups are generally really open to change, right? Aren't they? And they've got less baggage and less technical debt and less systems they have to move, but they're also looking at the change and embracing it a lot more than the sort of legacy bigger companies. Although there's always the intent to be fast, but it's harder, right?
Yeah, it is. Some of those larger enterprises can be slow-moving beasts, for sure. I guess from a startup perspective, they have the ability to pivot and move. Sometimes it's even greenfields. And I guess as well with a startup, they're potentially looking at a market, looking for a sort of gap in the market where enterprise organisations are generally established.
Yeah, so it's much easier to pivot, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can then, they're actually looking to pivot, and then they're not set on an end goal, they're actually set on where the gaps are, which is kind of counterintuitive for big organisations where they've got, we want to dominate this
area.
Yeah.
And then sometimes with an enterprise it becomes prescribed as opposed to taking that product orientated or sort of customer centric mindset around letting the customer lead what it is they want and being able to respond to that. And I think that's the emphasis of what an enterprise organisation may or may not want to be wanting to achieve. But it makes sense in this day and age, especially when you overlay that with the emerging technologies that are coming out as well.
Yeah, sometimes we're seeing these organisations they can see the problem in the slow-moving machine, so they actually set up a separate thing on the side, don't they? And this is different building, different setup, and more digital focused, and where they can really do the innovation and really encourage it without the burden of the old mindsets and the old legacy bits of the business into this new world and the fast-changing space.
Yeah. That's definitely a smart way of doing things initially, and I guess it just comes down to what the organisation wants as part of that bigger, grander journey that they may or may not want to embark on. Obviously, the idea of starting small and proving things out, that's on a slightly larger scale, but ultimately it's whether the organisation as a whole wants to embrace what's happening over in that other building or not, whether they want to take it on, whether they can, or whether they want to look to move to transition towards that.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways you can approach that.
So with all this change coming up, I guess the summary on your view, there's heaps going on. We can see AI and the tooling that comes with that is actually going to make things move faster. So what are your key things about at an organisation level, what we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think when I think about some of our customers and the sort of problems that they're coming to us with, there's a lot of synergies within that. But the themes that I can see running through that is that they need to adopt change almost as BAU. They need to be able to take things on. They need to establish their practices and their culture to enable them to take these new technologies, these new ways of working on to enable that change.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the chat, Bjarne.
It's a pleasure, Rob. Thank you.